and you know. We're on the second episode of Season 2 of Psych, and adding the theme music that I found here with your fan Psych podcast. We don't have the episode title in front of me. Maybe we should pull that up, or maybe we can not worry about that. But, okay, it's the episode where they're discovering a crime that leads to a dinosaur-related incident. But my overall take on this episode was pretty good, even though it was slightly telegraphed to an extent. But it wasn't maybe as like the new Gus, the new Corbin Burnson, Sean's father, as much as it seemed more like one of the episodes from last season, actually. But I don't know. I guess pop culture references, everything with Lassiter being on his streak, and then of course you knew it was going to end eventually. But I like the way they actually twisted it. So, but anyway, my co-host has a few thoughts here.
I thought the Psych Out was a little disappointing. The blooper Psych Outs aren't as good as when they do musical things. I like those Psych Outs the best. They could have done the Don Was song, "Everybody Do the Dinosaur." Everybody do the dinosaur. Or yes, the Crimson. Which Crimson? Well, there's also a Pete Townsend song, Outrun the Dinosaur. That would have been good, too. But one thing that was interesting was Tim Matheson, who is best known for Animal House directed, which I believe they should have Tim Matheson guest appear, and our old friend Peter Riegert, also from Animal House, should guest appear on an episode of Psych. I believe we've opened the door to that happening, and it would be great to see that.
Any Animal House connections, I'm not sure that I can think of. But they're probably, 6 degrees of... Someone on the show actually probably has been connected to Animal House, or Tim Matheson and Peter Riegert. Yeah, but I'm saying this particular show and this particular episode, other than the fact Matheson directed it, you could have had Peter Riegert. If Matheson directs another episode, you could have Peter Riegert appear, maybe. I don't know. Peter Riegert seems to be kind of busy with the independent film or whatever. I don't know what else he's doing right now. He's been guest starring. He was like on The West Wing, I think. Oh, there you go. Wasn't Dooley was Peter Riegert ever on The West Wing?
Well, no, but Tim Matheson was. He was the vice president. Okay. So there's a connection between those two.
Okay,
yes. Yeah. But I like Peter Riegert. I want to see him on my favorite show.
That would be great, Of course, when people like Peter Riegert. They did have a lot of references. No, they didn't reference Animal House, but they were talking about the movie On the Ground, the what was it? The digging in the hole. It's called Hole, right? The movie?
The Shia LaBeouf movie, which Gus, of course, could not remember the title of, I believe was called Holes. We can look this up on IMDb. But notice that there's a recurring Tim thing. We had Tim Curry appearing in the first episode and Tim Matheson directing this one. Which makes me wonder if we'll have somebody named Tim, working on the third episode in the season.
That's probably more coincidence, but next week it looks like the preview is with Lou Diamond Phillips. And the woman who's the guest star, if you read the description, I think it's on TV.com, pretty much describes her as trying to kind of foil Sean's plot, which in a way, actually, the beginning of this week's episode, you'd almost look like he might finally be discovered, or, his identity is basically thrown up in the air. But next week it might be more... uncertain, I think Juliet especially is starting to kind of doubt him, but she likes to play along, which I think they didn't use her as much this week as they did last week. I was kind of disappointed. I thought they were going to do that more this season, which they may, but not this past week, unfortunately.
Well, no, because there's a parallel between Sean and Clark Kent on Smallville, which is nobody can know the identity this early in the series. They've got to keep that a secret, where somebody may suspect something every week, but nobody will realize that it's actually happening. And I'm being interrupted by the theme music again.
Theme music's not really coming on the mic, but it could be edited in. A lot of shows are doing secret identity kind of stuff. Kyle XY also, it's kind of a similar thing. We knew that, but I'm saying that maybe ultimately may be where the show is going to go to whenever it were to end, is they'll find out he really isn't a psychic. But I'm just saying that Juliet might eventually get close enough to them where she'll know the truth. Also, I did like the use of Corbin Burnson. The fact he actually helped Sean solve the crime in a way, and then he gets upset, and the whole thing with the shrink.
Well, Juliet finding out the secret could be the parallel to, for example, Chloe knowing Clark's secret on Smallville. So it might be a similar thing to that. But yeah, it was nice to see Corbin Burnson back in the mix more this week than he was last week. Although it was fun watching him in the previous episode jousting with Tim Curry. But speaking to the Gus thing again, it's like, yeah, Gus reverted more back to last season's form. But again, there was the common thread with last week's episode with food. It was like this recurring running bunch of gags with Gus and food.
Yeah, that's sort of his shtick. I mean, it's a lot of shows have like an element of like consistent, almost predictable humor. One of Gus's things is, when Sean's needing help with something, especially in front of his dad, Gus is just not going to help him out. Just like, Sean, I'm here for the pie, The thing with the lock, that was one thing I have to take to task. That was a little too blatant, where, okay, Gus actually does pick the lock, and then Sean comes back and acts like he's figured the combination out, and then Gus has to stand right next to him. The cops stand all the way back. I mean, maybe Lassiter didn't see what's behind that. I think Juliet may have.
Well, I thought that scene would have been better if they'd had Gus give him the wrong numbers. That would have been better. Just to have Gus get a little bit even with Sean for the grandstanding.
Not to completely go on a tangent, but you mentioned the Psych out earlier. I forgot to mention. Yeah, I think they've kind of either been lacking in material for them, or they're kind of building it up. They maybe last season they kind of just had a lot of stuff, and they just kind of got in the habit of doing the karaoke and all that stuff, and it made good for what they could add on the end. Whereas I think they were thinking they'd do the same thing this season, and it just didn't translate, or maybe the episodes are longer because oftentimes they last longer. The Psych Out today was short. Last week's Psych Out was pretty short. Generally, they're a little longer.
I'm hoping for the third one they go back to a musical one. I prefer the karaoke ones to these blooper reel things. Although the Chief hadn't been involved in a Psych Out, I seem to recall any of the other episodes from the previous season, so it was something new at least.
Anyway, is there any other news we want to mention? A lot of people on their podcast mention news. Not much. I mean, as far as Psych goes. Well, I mean, we can mention the fact that the Psych podcast MySpace page is up. Obviously, we're going to put these up here. Just to announce, I mean, I should have made this announcement at the beginning of the recording, which I didn't do. But hopefully we can do this every week or almost every week and put them up. I'm going to set up an actual blog, not on MySpace, so I can actually host it, and then people can subscribe. However that works. My knowledge of that at this point is on a low. But that's one of the plans with this deal. We're not an official podcast that I know of, but also they've showed stuff actually during the show about stuff you can buy, like mugs, obviously information. It's all connected to the USA Network site. So
I wish I was a rich man so I could buy all the Psych-related swag, but maybe someday. I was wondering if Kristen or Kristen from E or what's her name, TV gal, if they are aware of Psych and if they've ever said anything about the show, or if they're saying currently anything about the show. I haven't read their columns in a while.
Hey, this is getting back to a little maybe historically. My sense about last year was it just like me. It came out of nowhere, and I don't know, the show just was a summer show, but not that many people knew about it, and then they started advertising. And as far as I know, not TV gal, I'm blank, Amy. She did not have any mention of it in her columns because summer is obviously slow. Kristen also, I mean, because her column is so monopolized by a lot of different shows that are kind of soap opera. But then in the winter, when it did come back, I do remember seeing TV gal mention it. And the thing is, I emailed her a few times about that, so I don't know if that had anything to do with more people who talked about that. But yeah, I mean, she's aware of it. I would guess Kristen's aware of it. How much time it's had this recent weeks on their columns is another story. I haven't been able to keep up, but I guess maybe in the next few weeks we'll have to mention if they do a shout-out or anything about it.
Well, also, as we know from past experience with Kristen, she likes her hunky dudes on her various shows, and you'd think James Rodier may fall into that category for her, so we'll have to see. Was that The Clash or something? Okay. I wonder if the Indians are doing any tour. Okay. I wonder if the Indians are. We should check and see if the Indians are doing a tour and if they're coming anywhere near here. Maybe get them to play a show in the Twin Cities, and maybe we could have them on feature them on a podcast if they ever come to town. And do a post show conversation with them and about their involvement and how they were signed up to do the theme song for the show.
The other thing we need, the Friendly Indians is the name of the group. They have a MySpace page. This is the coming week is the Comic-Con actual Comic-Con. So I don't know if they're going to revisit or whatever. USA should run a rerun of that the George Takei episode from last season. No. In California, this week is Comic-Con. But also there is another related event this week that I'm blanking on. But the OC Fair, anyway. But, I'm sure most people that would be actually hearing this, since it's going to be linked to, are aware that both Gus and Sean do have a MySpace page. My suspicion is it's not actually James Rode and Dule Hill, but it's someone involved with the show doing it. But they keep blogs and everything. But most people probably are aware of that. I personally haven't spent the time reading through their blogs extensively because it's not like especially Dule, the Gus blog seems to be pretty extensive, but I don't even know if the Friendly Indians ever tour. They just have done the theme music and have some music on their MySpace page. But there was another event that I'm blanking on this week. Or no, you mentioned something how they need to do a Psych episode at some event, right?
The band String Cheese Incident is doing one of their last concerts, and I believe that Sean and Gus should go there and investigate some sort of murder at the concert or something. They need to do some episode where they go to a concert. Maybe some retro 80s band that, Dule likes or Gus likes and Sean doesn't, or vice versa.
Maybe find someone who actually, like a musician of some kind, that like an older, like somewhat established musician of some kind. I don't know, Sheena Easton or something like that. That might be a fan of the show, and they could like figure a way to coincide it with the plot. Because the thing with last season's episode at the. With the Gus character especially, because he's so he's fixated on certain cerebral things, certain quote unquote. You could say he's kind of he's not a nerd, but he's obsessed with certain things. Also, the fact that today's Harry Potter, I was thinking they might try to do something with that. But the episode at Comic-Con last season was a really cool kind of appealing to a certain demographic episode. They could do that with music. We've mentioned Northeast Art Rock Festival, Nearfest, with people that like progressive rock, or out in California, CalProg. But unfortunately, those are too small. But in the movie, the William Shatner movie, Free Enterprise, there's this guy. One of the characters in the movie is a Yes fan, and he's obsessed. It kind of captures a similar kind of ideal that the sci-fi geek is really obsessed with, or the Harry Potter geek. So I think you're right. The String Cheese or something, they could definitely, the fact that they've done a lot with music, could do something, investigate a crime where they could be obsessed with music.
Well, of course, any excuse to include Sheena Easton is fine by me. I think she still looks great, although she doesn't quite have the abs of steel she had back in the 80s, but still, also Highlander. Well, actually, I thought they should have gotten, although this is going off the topic for the show, the other show we like, the new show in USA, Burn Notice. They got Gabrielle Anwar to play the girlfriend. I thought Sheena Easton would have been a better choice. Seeing as they're going for somebody with the Irish accent, Irish-Scottish accent. But I digress.
Well, that's the thing. We mentioned this last week. The fact that all the USA shows kind of have a similar theme. They could actually tie that in somehow. They could tie that in with all the other shows, like they did the commercials with Monk and with the Dead Zone, with Anthony Michael on the Dead Zone, and then now Burn Notice. But anything more to add, or is that basically it?
One thing I thought they should do for an episode is have another psychic on the show. Have somebody else who is a psychic, and have them kind of have dueling psychics between them and Sean, where the other psychic's like, no, that's not what I'm sensing. It's like Sean's like, what do you mean that's not what you're sensing?
The female character next week is I think, okay, let me just pull this up here. Well, we're kind of going to do a little recording improvise. But if you read the description of... I'm not sure who she is, who the actress is. But from what I read, Lou Diamond Phillips is on next week's episode, and then he has a partner, and this partner kind of doesn't really believe, like, she's much more skeptical of Sean being a psychic than Lassiter is, because she is a psychic.
Skepticism would be more skeptical than Lassiter.
Let's just see here. Let me. I thought it was on TV.com. I could be wrong about that, but I read a description of a couple of the first. Yeah, Psy versus Psy, the name of the next week episode. The FBI employs their own psychic in a search for a counterfeiter, causing the department to work together in an effort to prove that Sean is the better psychic. Why do I think there's something about what's going to actually happen is she's going to be a fraud, actually?
Or maybe she won't be. But another thing they could do is maybe do a spoof of the psychic hotline phenomenon. I mean, I know it's not as... Yeah, I know it's not perhaps as popular or publicized as it was in the old days, but I got to believe there still are such things going on. It'd be interesting to kind of base an episode around that. And I wonder if they could talk him into making a guest appearance on the show. That would be interesting.
John Edward being him. Yeah, either John Edward or Dionne Warwick or... wasn't there, not Carl Weathers, Billy D. Williams also? Billy D. Williams, I think, was involved in one of those infomercials. I mean, there's a few, like, somewhat known psychics I've heard about, but it might be controversial because a lot of people, they don't really get good PR, and, like, anything that, it's like the telemarketers or Don Lapre, having them show up on the show, even the creators probably would have some issue with it, but anyway. Well, so unfortunately we're not able to completely elaborate with it because the episodes are very much standalone. Although I think next week's episode does have more, from the premise, does have more, we can kind of decipher what they're going to do. But, true, the time of this is kind of irrelevant when whoever downloads this podcast. But, we're kind of just finding our feet on, I'm sure like most podcasts that, in their early stages are just figuring things out. And I imagine... Oh, right. Segue. I need to do like a Wikipedia on somewhere probably in California. This is our guess. At least on the captioning, when you use captioning, they were using the word segue, referring to Segway, Segway. That's referring to some kind of train system, bus system, some kind of transportation thing. Well, okay, there's Segway. I do a search on Google. Segway human transporter, an eclectic scooter. Oh, right. I'm feeling really stupid now. This is that thing that came out a few years ago. You remember what we were talking about?
No, I don't actually. Kyle, enlighten me.
The light bulb just went off. I got the sense that Sean gets. Remember a few years, at least I remember hearing about this, about around 99, right on the turn of the century, the quote-unquote century. These scientists came up with this idea, this news about the greatest invention in the last 100 years. It's going to revolutionize all this stuff. And it turns out what it is Segway. It's like a bike that, not a bike, but it's like a scooter that runs on its own, really. It doesn't require any fuel or anything like that.
So kind of like the thing Sean was using in the flashback at the beginning to propel his dinosaur. So that was a little inside joke there.
I mean, maybe that is not what they're referring to. Maybe there is some other reference to Segway, Segway, or the captioning we had was incorrect. But if it is, then it's one of those things where, like, Psych is definitely a show where it really can help to go back and watch an episode a second time to, like, catch a lot of the references or having captioning. But I'd probably be able to follow why they were using the reference Segway in those scenes at the time.
Like I said, if anybody listening to this, hop on the blog and share your insights with us. Maybe if there's somebody out in California who gets the reference far better than we naive Minnesotans would understand it.
I may have to add something to this now that I'm just thinking about it because I've seen this with like the Kyle XY podcast. This might be like a combination season 2 episodes 1 and 2. So this might be just chopped on depending on how my audio editing skills. But this might be kind of a review of both the first 2 episodes of the show of the season. So yeah, and it will be on the blog, hopefully the blog or on the MySpace page. But again, we're in our infancy, but I'm not sure how much more there is to add here. But so we're gonna wrap this up. But we'd love any comments or any requests or feedback of any kind. Hopefully we can get going on this. I'm sure there's other people that have talked about Psych in a podcast, but not maybe exclusively for the show. So, although you and I easily could be doing podcasts about a lot of other stuff too at some point. But any last words?
No, I'm looking forward to the next episode. So far, I've enjoyed the first 2 episodes of the season, and one last thing is Emmy nominations came out this week, and not surprisingly, but still disappointingly, of course, Psych was not included among them, which is totally unfair. I would rank it one of the 5 best shows on TV. In fact, with Veronica Mars getting canceled, I would dare hazard that I think it's the best thing that's on right now. I look forward to seeing it every week. I can't get enough of the show, and there are very few TV shows I can say that about.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I've said it many times, but it's kind of the point where I don't expect it because it's like anything when you find the diamonds in the roughs or the brilliance within all the crap. There's a reason why that is, because people don't have the attention spans. I mean, maybe I'm stereotyping a little bit here, but that seems to be a lot of times with intelligence. I mean, you have your exceptions, like Lost is really well written and it's popular, but yeah, I mean, that's why we're doing this podcast and why I've talked about the show, because it's really the best show on TV. But at the same time, I don't expect it, or let alone any cable shows other than the HBO stuff, which there's got to be a connection with the people that control the Emmys and the Golden Globes with the HBO. Other than Tony Shalhoub with Monk, I don't recall any cable shows ever being involved in the Emmy discussions. It's always pretty much primetime network TV season shows.
One thing I'd like to look into is how they do the voting for the People's Choice Awards, because that might be the way to get shows like Psych that are less recognized by the media and the voting powers that be, and get them the credit that they deserve for being excellent shows, having excellent actors, having outstanding writing.
I think James Roday. James Roday actually did get nominated for like the Cable Ace Awards or whatever. Either the Cable Ace Awards or some other. I'd retract one thing I did say though. I think some of the FX shows like The Shield and the show with Dennis Leary, they've gotten some Emmy discussion, but it seems like those shows particularly just they kind of get pimped by the media and by the reporters in the entertainment industry. That it's kind of inevitable. Whereas Psych, Dule Hill, Torben Bernsen, they don't have a recognition or a visibility the way that those shows do, unfortunately.
Well, and part of that, I think, with Psych lies with the fact that NBC, rather than, they've basically put it in the farm system channel, which is USA, as opposed to having it in the big leagues, which is on NBC itself. But I object, for example, to Sopranos getting an Emmy nomination for being one of the best shows, because the last season of Sopranos was not very good, especially that last episode. But that's kind of it for me for my comments.
We got to wrap this up. So it's not an issue of being able to create a longer podcast. It's just we got to make it value. But thanks for listening. We'll hopefully you can hear us again next week, or if we combine the next week's episode with this, depending on how things go. Thanks. Bye.